Hello, hello, hello out there. Happy Monday, y'all. Happy Faith, Purpose, Profit, what I like to call FPP Live, a time where we connect all things faith with purpose and profit. I wonder if you realize that God gave you purpose. He created you on purpose for purpose, and that purpose is connected to profit for all those that need you, plus profit for you, right? Because profit means gain. Excited to be here with you. So as you're coming in, of course, tell me name and where you're joining from. Tell me hello. Hey, Renata, I see you in BK. And hey, my meaty B in DC. Excited to see you both here after a phenomenal weekend. Those of you that don't know, we just had a phenomenal weekend, 2-day intensive with a group of phenomenal people starting or growing their purpose-focused businesses called Be the Answer. We had such a great time virtually. So with that said, let me get focused on our conversation for this particular FPP Live. Hey, Yolanda. And we started a series last week. The series is called Cultivate Your Calling. And I started this series because the series prior to this one, the series prior to this one, I walked you through the 4-step framework, what I call your brilliance framework, because when you live on purpose, you're meant to shine. As Matthew 5:16 says, let your light so shine among men and women that they may see your good work and glorify your Father in heaven. So as you shine with your purpose, in order to shine, you got to know what it is. And so that previous 4-part series I walked you through the 4-part brilliance framework. And now I'm walking you through all the things around your purpose, because one thing you got to clarify and the next thing you got to cultivate. You can't do one without the other. So before I start going in, if you've missed any of those conversations, I want to invite you to go over to my YouTube channel. You can watch any past episodes at nrjnetwork.com. And so let's again get this party started for this episode. Again, continuing in the 4-part series on Cultivate Your Calling. Today is part 2. Part 2 is you must fight for it. You must fight for it. Listen, God gives you purpose. He plants the seed. He's not going to water it, nurture it, fertilize it, grow it. He's not doing any of that. He did his part. Now you've got to commit to clarify it and then cultivate it. And so as we continue with our conversation, we're really looking at, first, let me take cultivate, just to remind you, what does cultivate mean? It means to prepare, to foster the growth of, to improve by labor, case, or study. So if we're going to cultivate it, the second thing we've got to do is we've got to fight for it. See, I wonder if you realize that there's a battle in your mind. So our foundational Bible verse for today is Romans 12:2. So I'm reading this out of the New Living Translation that says, do not copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. But the emphasis here is by changing the way you think. And I think the thing I think is so interesting is people don't realize that in order for your purpose to fully get cultivated, you got to fight. Again, it doesn't happen automatically. So what I want to walk you through in this conversation, in the part 1 of our conversation, is the 5 things you've got to do to fight for it. The 5 things that you've got to do, the 5 steps to fight for your purpose. See, the other thing I think many of us don't realize, go look at John 10:10. It says the enemy comes to steal, to kill, and to destroy. So he's going to do whatever it takes to get you off track, to distract you, to make you stumble and fall, because there are people that need you. And when you do the thing that God created you to do, you bless all the people around you. And that's what I mean by profit. Listen, more money, more purpose. Because the more money you make, the more people you can serve, the more good you can stay and do in this world. But what you think about, you bring about. So we've got to check your mindset. We got to check, I call it your bankroll zip code, because wherever your mind is that will dictate the activation that happens in your purpose, your activation in your life, the activation around everything, even in relationships. Listen, if you're judging the current relationship based on past relationships, that means you need to shift your thinking. Just because somebody did you wrong previously does not mean the current relationship, whether it's your man, your boss, doesn't mean the current current thing is going to do the same thing. But what happens is we carry our mindset around like baggage. And if you don't do the work, and I'm going to walk you through the 5 steps you got to do, if you don't do the work to cultivate that mindset, to assess where you are and do the work to shift so you go after your next level, then you'll be stuck right there. You know, it's interesting. If we talk about baggage and your mindset can be like baggage, listen, we have over 60, I read this article probably 3 years ago. I think it says 60,000, probably more than that, 60,000 thoughts in a day. And let's say millions of thoughts in a day. And over 60% of them are already pre-wired to be stinking thinking, meaning that you might have a desire that all of a sudden you might say, I can't do that. Or you start letting something that happened in your past dictate that you can't do that or have that or be that. And so if you're going to go after a whole new level, you've got to check your mindset. And that mindset, like I said a few minutes ago, can be baggage. It can weigh you down. It can keep you from your next level. Listen, if they weigh our bags before we get on an airplane, you know why they do that, right? They do that because if the plane is too heavy, the plane will crash. That's why the singer Aaliyah died. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Their cargo was too heavy. It made the plane crash. Well, if your mindset is too heavy, if you got a way down with yesterday, you can't move into your tomorrow. So I want to stop by tonight and really look at your mindset. Okay, so here are 5 steps to fight in that battle that is your mind. You ready? And I want you to see where you are. Number 1, you got to accept that your thinking needs to shift. Your thinking needs some adjusting. There's a Bible verse, Romans 12:3. So I just read Romans 12:2. This is the Bible verse that's right after it. Romans 12:3 says, "For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself or herself more highly than she ought to, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith." Think about what it means when you're not sober. Might mean you kind of fool yourself out. Talked about that last week, right? So it's like remain humble. But at the same time, don't think, I've arrived. I don't need to learn anything else. I've arrived. I already know how to do that. See, when you're doing something you've never done before, it requires new tools. One of my favorite quotes, the tools you've used on this level are not sufficient for your next. When God has new for you, I don't care if you have a PhD or you sit in the corner office, there is more for you. So you've got to accept that your thinking needs to shift, needs some adjusting. Just like our car, we take our cars in for a tune-up. You're supposed to. And when you don't, when your tires are out of alignment, it begins to throw other things off in your car. Well, that's the same thing that happens with your mindset. See, out of the mindset, then really your mindset comes from your heart. And that's what we kind of talked about last week when we talked about motive in part 1. So really step number 2 is understand your why. I'm not going to dig into that. We talked about that in part 1. If you miss part 1, go back and listen or watch it. But I need you to get this. If your motives are off, your thinking is off. And 9 times out of 10, when your thinking is off, is based on number 3, identify the negative chatter. Now I'm going to really show you how these 3 go together, okay? So if number 1 is accept that your mindset needs a shift, you need to understand your why, because your motive, your heart, is kind of connects to your mind. So if you have improper motive, trust me, it has something to do with that negative chatter in your mind, y'all. So the thing that I think is interesting is many of us, especially those of you that are African-American women like me, we learn to keep it moving. We don't stop and process what we've gone through. And what happens when we don't process what we've gone through, we carry that baggage into our next. And then this relationship has it, and then this relationship has it, and then this boss has it, and then this job has it, and you're blaming everybody else, but you keep being in the same movie, starring in the same role. Listen, this was me. I remember every relationship I had prior to my husband. I promise you the man kept doing the same thing. Now, I could have said all men are dogs, but that's not real. Now, if I want to project that into my life, then that's what will come back into my life. But if I stop and look at my thought process around that, I kept having the same experience because I hadn't yet done the work on me. So when I stopped projecting that, I met my husband the next day, y'all, and that's real. We got fixed up. But when I stopped projecting, and I realized that I have been starring in the same movie over and over again. I I kept reading the same script and being in the same script, that I had to make a different choice. So what's the thing that's keeping you where you are? If you keep saying the same thing, repeat over and over, I guarantee you there's something present there that you've got to check. See, that negative chatter is like the Verizon network. You guys know that commercial? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? How many times do you guys do that when you're on the phone and you have bad connection? Where if you're not stopping to think about it, you're not connecting your mind with your heart, your motives, to really look at where is there a disconnect. Here's what I mean. See, if you have a desire in your heart, that means you're meant to have it. I believe God puts the desires in our heart. So if you're meant to have it, then all the things that are keeping you from it, that's the disconnect. And so you've got to really think about, number one, accept your mindset needs shifting, because if you're looking at your motives and you're looking at your negative chatter and something's out of alignment, you've got to do the work to get in alignment. So here are some things and some ways that you can be out of alignment. Perception. Are you so focused on what everybody else thinks and you're not even thinking about what does God want from me? I remember when I started in this journey and I worked in entertainment, all my friends kept saying, are you crazy? Well, shoot, I felt crazy too. But I could either choose what they were saying because they were speaking for what they could see, but God works in what we cannot see. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So if you're going to go after another level of you, it's going to require faith. It is. Which means you got to shift your mindset to get under God's mission. That's what submission means, to get under God's mission, not the mission of the world, not the mission of your friends, not the mission of what other people think you should do, be, not the mission of your college degree. My degree was TV and film. I don't do anything. Well, that's not true. I do kind of do TV and film now, but I couldn't see it when I left, how those things connected. But I trusted God. I had to do some real work on my mindset. Number two, when my business was broken, see, I'm from South Central LA. So how many of you guys know this, the saying, we got to rob Peter to pay Paul, and I'm broke, and all the things that keep us stuck in a place that we don't want. When I started claiming new things for myself and trusting God for it and doing the work to go and get it, see, and to do that, I had to shift my mindset. I had to understand the negative chatter that said things like, oh, I'll never find a man, or I'll never make that amount of money, or I'm broke. No, I never say I'm broke. I just say that's not in my budget right now, because I'm never broke. So you've got to really begin to look at what is the negative chatter, because here's the thing, and this is really, really key, y'all. Motivation is only going to take you so far, because that negative chatter will dissipate that motivation. If you don't do the work to get rid of the negative chatter, then the motivation will go away. Empowerment does not last. Not if the negative chatter supersedes it. Even willpower doesn't last if the negative chatter comes in and supersedes it. So you've got to really look at, and this is why, again, you got to accept that your mindset needs some shifting. It needs some alignment work. So I do these segments, y'all. This is what I know is imperative, that you get in a program with a coach. Listen, I've been in counseling and I've been in coaching. I've been coaching now. Even my current coach, because my current biggest issue is my health. And all my BDS related, I talked about that as my example all weekend. That's my current biggest issue right now. And in order for me to stay healthy in my 50s, yeah, I said 50s, what I was doing in my 40s, my 30s, my 20s, it ain't working. Right? If I'm gonna have the energy to do what I do and fit all the clothes in my closet and everything else, I had to shift how I think about eating. I had to get a new coach to teach me a different way to do this thing. Look, I could have easily been depressed when I couldn't fit any of my clothes. I can fit some of them now. But my point is, that could have kept me stuck and without moving forward. So you've got to identify, how is your thought life keeping you from the transformation that's possible for you? And then even if you look at your thought life and look at negative chatter, look at the people around you, because sometimes they are feeding the negative chatter. If you're thinking I can never be or I can never do, and they feed into that, then guess what? You never will be and you never will do. If I think it's not possible, then guess what? It's not possible. But if I think it's possible, then guess what? It's possible. So you've really got to look at how do you shift the perception, the public opinion, the viewpoint that the lenses that you're looking at life through. Because if you're going to expand and go to a new level, that means that you're going to have to look at everything you do in a new and different way. That's why I believe this Bible verse says, and my paper fell, so hold on. Of course, my paper fell on the floor, right? My Bible verse on it. That's what this Bible verse says. Again, Romans 12:2. Do not copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. How do you do that? How does God change you? It's spending time. My clients know I call it be, do, have formula. We call ourselves human beings, but we're not. We're human doings because we focus on what do I need to do? What do I need to do? And you need do as well, but you also need God. So I'll read this again. Do not copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. See, the world would have said to me, Nicole, you got a bachelor's degree in TV, in television and film, and you're working on some of the hottest TV shows. Why would you quit that? See, the world would say you need to just continue to matriculate in that because you're doing really well. When God had a different plan for me. The next part of this says, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. It didn't make any kind of sense to me at the time. It didn't make any sense. But I had to trust God. And for many of you, the reason your businesses are stuck, the reason why you haven't started your business for that matter, is because you're trying to wait till it's the right time. There is no such thing as a right time. I'm telling you, I believe God does things so that we can trust him, which means we have to do number 4. So let me do a quick review. Number 1, you got to accept that your thinking needs some adjusting. Number 2, you got to understand your why. This is why I talked about motives in part 1 of this series. Whole conversation on understanding your why, because your why bumps up against number 3, your negative chatter. Identify it. What's the negative thing that keeps playing in your mind on repeat? Because you got to do number 4, press stop. So when you see it coming up, once you identify it, when you see it coming, you've got to dissipate it. You got to do the work to eliminate it. You got to do the work to flip the switch. This is one of the biggest principles that I see so many business coaches just overlook, y'all. Because again, if you're learning something new and you've never done it, it's going to be scary. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But in order for you to push past the fear, you've got to dissipate the negative chatter or understand it. You know, it's recognize that it's there and recognize that it's telling you a lie. Once you realize the lie that is telling you that you're not smart enough or you're not good enough or you'll never make that amount of money, or do you realize where you're from, or any of that negative chatter that's playing in your mind, once you identify it's there, you can usually flip it into the truth. But you've got to do the work. And if you can't do the work, this is when you need to get in a counseling program. Because it doesn't go away just because you think, it's going to go away. I'm going to put a bunch of affirmations on my mirror. Okay, those are great. But you've got to do them over and over and over and over until your mindset shifts to be in alignment with the affirmations. It just doesn't happen because you say, I'm going to say affirmations for a week. Yeah. So you've got to press stop. You got to say, oh, that's that thing again. I don't receive that. I'm not doing that. Nope. Right? So that you can really begin to shift. So stop it and then put a new behavior there. So I remember when I used to say that all men were dogs. And then, I had that realization after I started really doing the work on me to realize that I kept being in the same script because I kept repeating the same negative patterns, and therefore I kept repeating the same behaviors. When I shifted and I said stop, I met my husband. Same thing happened in my business. When my business was broken, and I kept thinking, hey, maybe I'm just meant to struggle because I'm in ministry. This is my ministry. And God said, no, boo, service and struggle should never coexist. I had to be willing to do the work. That's when I hired that first coach. And my life has never been recognizable since then. So you've got to do the work to stop it. And then number 5 is learn that growth equals being outside of comfort. You're not going to grow and be comfortable. I say this all the time, especially those of you that are here with me week after week. Your comfort and your conviction can never coexist. Many of you want to start a business and you want to do it in a comfortable way. That is not real. It's just not. You want it to be easy. You don't have to put any extra work. You want it to look. God doesn't check your bank account when he's giving you a new level to go after. He's checking your faith. So I remember when I signed up for my coach and I didn't know if I could afford it, but I couldn't afford not to do it. So I said, I'm gonna figure it out month to month. That was such a faith walk. That was such a faith walk. And even when I came back to, so many of you guys know I've started this in 1993. In 2012, after I hired my coach then hired me to come into her business to develop the programs and do all the programming for her company. Well, after I had been there for 3 years, God said, okay, that's enough. It's time for you to go out and go back to do your own company. And I was like, but I like it over here. I don't have to worry about payroll. See, I gotten easy. And so I remember the first month. Now, I'm going to tell y'all the truth. Now, I don't advise this to any of my clients, but I had only saved $30,000. But see, I didn't know God was going to tell me to quit. So I only had saved $30,000, right? Of my personal money. My husband and I have a savings account, but I'm committed to not touch that to retirement. So in my business, from what I was making, and well, from my paycheck, what I was making, I had only saved $30,000. And when God told me to quit, I quit with only $30,000 in my reserve for my business. And then I hired another coach that cost 20 of that 30. So again, I had to trust God. I had to be uncomfortable. I didn't know that I was going to generate 25,000. So I made more than I spent in the first month. But I was willing to do what my coach said. I was willing to do it afraid. I was willing to get outside of my comfort zone, which means I had to shift my mindset. So my mindset said, "Ooh, girl, you can't afford that." My mind said, "Have you lost your mind? You can't quit like that." But I had to trust God. And for many of you, you never will cultivate your calling at the level that's possible for you because you want it to be easy. You want it to be comfortable. You want it to be the right time. There will never be a right time. I cannot say that enough. You're going to have to do it afraid and be uncomfortable and trust that as you jump, that God has your parachute. As you jump, because you won't see the parachute ahead of time. Shoot, you won't even know how to work the parachute. How do I know? Because I've been there. Not once, not twice. I promise you, every time God is growing my business still, I'm in a place of trust. I'm in a place of trust. And if I don't stay focused on that place, then what happens is I mess up the cultivation of my calling. I mess up the cultivation of my purpose. So it's like when you're watering a seed. If you give up, you water it and water it and water it and water it. And at some point, the plant starts to come out of the ground. If I stop watering it, I mess up the germination of that seed. For many of you, because you won't stay in, because you won't do the work, because you want it to be easy, you are not cultivating the growth of that seed, which is your purpose, your DNA, your distinct natural ability. God put it in. He's done. Now it's time for you to do the work. So that's our conversation for today. You must fight for it. It's not going to happen automatically. You've got to do the work to cultivate your calling. So number one, you got to identify your thinking needs to be adjusted. That's an ongoing thing. It's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing thing. Number two, you got to understand your why. Again, if you didn't watch or listen to episode 1, go back. Because really, we talked about your motives. And if you don't check your motives, baby, you will understand your why, which then goes into number 3, your thinking. That negative chatter that's present, I guarantee you, it's attached to your motives. Guarantee you. And then number 4, when you identify the negative chatter, number 4, you got to stop it. Press stop. Like, no. I'm not going to be broke. I'm not going to be single. I'm not going to whatever that is for you. Stop it. Stop it in its tracks. But you got to do the work to identify what it is and then put a truth that defeats that lie. Oh, the enemy will try to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus said, I've come that you have life and have it more abundantly. Well, you do the work to go after your abundantly, but all, which is number 5, outside of your comfort zone. You're going to learn that growth is going to be outside your comfort zone. So that's it for the first part of our conversation. You must fight for it. And so each of those are a fight. It's not going to be easy, but it's always worth it. God never said our journey would be easy, never. But it's always, always, always worth it. So as we continue this conversation, many of you know that we do a conversation on Tuesday mornings, which we dig deeper into our conversation from this part one, and it's on Clubhouse. The thing I absolutely love about Clubhouse is I can actually hear you. So you can ask me questions. You can tell me your insight. I can coach you live. So I want to invite you to join me tomorrow morning. FPPBreakfast.com is where you go. It's 8:30 a.m. EST every Tuesday morning. So Monday night I come here. I tell you our topic for the week. And then Tuesday morning we dig even deeper. Because listen, there's so much that I can give you about each of these topics. 30 minutes, I can't give it all to you. I want to make sure that if you're really going to go after the purpose, see, you're meant for more. You're meant for purpose. God has so much for you. But it's going to require some work. It's going to require some shifting of your mindset. It's going to require you to cultivate it. And so each of the 4 parts I'm walking you through are needed. And this one right here is a must. You must fight for it. It's like being a boxer in a ring. Look, Muhammad Ali never won a fight without having to put his fight in. He never won a fight without doing the workout, without doing all the things he had to do before he got in the ring. And many of you, the missing pieces that you're not doing the work before you get into the ring. Before you make 6 figures, before you have that $1 million business, you're not doing the work before it. That's the cultivation that has to occur. All right. So with that said, listen. 2 things. 1, I want you to share the value you got out of our conversation for today. Come on in and share the value you got. Hey, Sanji. And it says Facebook user. If you're in the Brilliance Tribe, I can't see who you are, right? So come on over to FPPLive.Live. So when you make comments, I know who you are, right? So listen. If I've given you any value, I want you to share the most valuable lesson you've gotten here from my conversation for tonight. And then number 2, do me one other favor and share this with your network. Now, when I ask you to share, I'm not trying to grow my followers, but what I am doing is trying to be obedient to the calling on my life. The thing that I know is that so many people need this insight, and the only way that it gets to spread is when we all share it. So there's a button below somewhere on Facebook. Now, those of you in my Facebook group, you can't share it. Go to FPPLive.Live. Again, FPPLive.Live, which is where I'm live right now, which is take you to my Facebook business page and share it there because it's public and everybody can see it. Do me a favor and share it with your networks because there are people in your community that have been trying their hardest to grow their purpose-focused business, and they keep bumping up against a wall. And they're bumping up against the wall because they don't know what to do to cultivate it. All right. So we'll continue our conversation again tomorrow morning. Number 1, share your value. The one thing you got out of this conversation that was valuable to you. And number 2, share it. So only 2 things I'll ever ask you to do every Monday. Oh, and number 3, join me tomorrow morning in Clubhouse, FPPBreakfast.com. All right. So with that said, that's part 1. I look forward to seeing many of you tomorrow morning. Have a good one.